Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. So what we are going to do today is, before we discuss what we are going to do today, what we discussed in the last class. So let me take you through all the sessions. The first class we discussed about the market research process, the 6 steps of the market or marketing research process, whatever you call it. The second class we discussed in detail about the problem definition and developing an approach to the problem. In the third session we continued with the step number 2 and we had certain examples. In session number 4 we discussed about the research design and types of research design, including what are the different types of research design? Exploratory and conclusive. In conclusive there is descriptive and causal. So in the last session we had a little bit of idea about the research design, what it is and what are its various types. In today's session we are going to discuss very important, which would be very easy to do as well as very important to do. Some sort of analysis, exploratory analysis we will see today. Please pay attention, because again whenever you are going to solve a business issue or a problem, these techniques would come very handy. It would save you. So whatever we are going to discuss today, it would help you analyze the issue so that you get to the problem. Second thing, it would give you a lot of ideas if you are into new product development, or if you want to know what customers think, feel, intend about your product. So exploratory research design, what it is? It is the design that we use for the initial problem definition step. We use there exploratory research design because we are still explorating the situation. We are exploring the situation. We are exploring the situation in the problem definition step. We want to go from symptom to probable cause. That's where we use the problem definition. That's where we use the exploratory research design. Exploratory as a word means that we do not know what are the variables that we need to deal with. What is the probable cause? What are its constituents? We don't have information about all that. We don't know what is going on. So we use exploratory research design. Various methods of exploratory research design: problem audit, interview with experts, qualitative research, secondary qualitative research, secondary data. All this can help you explore the issue and get to the problem. Now straight away we'll look at what are the exploratory research methods or techniques. Secondary data and qualitative research. These are the broadly 2 set of techniques that we use in exploratory research. What is secondary data? What is secondary data? Anybody who knows the answer?
That we get from internet or any other secondary sources, but not directly from the people that we are intended to ask.
No, let's say when you are conducting a research, you would have some set of customers. They are part of Indian population. Let's say census has collected data about them. The data is about them, coming from them. Will it be a primary or secondary? Primary data is the data that you collect first hand for the problem at hand, which did not exist before you defined the problem, before you state the problem. Secondary data is the data which existed before you defined the problem. So census data, whether you do market research or not, government will do census after each 10 years of gap. So there that data will be there. Likewise, many market research agencies like Nielsen, Kantar, GfK, these all would collect some data. Let's say Nielsen does it about the FMCG brand consumption, the panel data. Every month they collect it across many cities. So whether you conduct the market research or not, that data, you can use it. You can buy that data. That is, you can buy that data from companies like Nielsen, relevant to your product category. So the difference between primary and secondary data, clear? Secondary data, the data that existed before, that somebody else collected, but that you could use for your problem at hand. You could use for your issue at hand to get to the probable cause.
Sir, are these two steps already involved in marketing research program? What we find it? In the task involved.
Sorry?
In the task involved, we've already mentioned these 2 points.
Yeah, right. That's what I am talking about. We now know what are the methods, but now we will clarify them more and see how to conduct those. So knowing something is knowing that we use secondary data analysis, but how you do secondary data analysis. First of all, knowing there was no clarity about what is primary and secondary data. So I had to clarify that.
So that means primary data for one problem can be a secondary data for another problem afterwards.
Yeah. So you collected data for your problem at hand, and this data, let's say you put in your company repository. Tomorrow there is another issue that can use the data from your research as a secondary data. Now secondary data, which means will it be quantitative in nature or qualitative? Qualitative in the form of let's say paragraphs, words, sentences, videos. Both, very good. Yes, it can be both. Now qualitative research is the another technique. Secondary data is first, qualitative research is another technique. It is a very strong sort of technique which is used to get more and more insights from your customers. Survey is more about validation. You try to validate one correlates with another, or one is a, you try to sometime look at causality also in the correlation supported by some logic and theory and so on. Qualitative research is more for gathering insights. Qualitative research is very rich. Rich means the kind of insights, the kind of data that you get in qualitative, you would never get in quantitative. But there is a catch. In qualitative, we always do studies with a very small sample. Such a small sample that cannot be a representative of the population, because let's say if you are into a you are into a face cream, let's say for females, adult females, so their population would be in crores. Now when you want to, let's say, learn about this particular face cream buying and behavior, when you are doing qualitative research, you will do it with a selected, in qualitative research you will do it with a very small sample. That sample, let's say if that sample at max, let's say even if it is 100 cannot be a representative of a population of crores. And in 100 also there would be some differences, let's say age, economic status. So there further differences are there, and it will be very difficult for you to generalize the insights to the population, what this 50 women are speaking about using face cream, you cannot generalize, you cannot say all it would apply to crore of population of the customers, because that sample is very small. So after gathering insights from qualitative, then you conduct a large sample study, survey, where you use the representative samples in several thousands, let's say 0.1% of the population or 1% of the population, and then you try to just say that from the survey that this applies to my population. From qualitative you get tentative things which may or may not apply to population. That is why you conduct quantitative for validating and for confirming the probable cause and then solving it. So let's move further about the secondary data. So sometimes you would require to do this also for collecting secondary data. So there are certain criteria that one has to use to evaluate whether some secondary data is useful or not. So the criteria, so you cannot use every bit of secondary data that is on internet, because you don't know the credibility of the source, you don't know what is the data collection methodology, whether it was scientifically rigorous or whether somebody has stated their opinions but has put in the form of a research study. Which means if you are relying on some secondary data for your business issue at hand, you have to first of all check its specifications, which means whether in that secondary data it is written how the data was collected, whether the data collection process is mentioned, how rigorous was it, how representative was it for its population. So all those things, how the data was collected, was it bias free in the way it was collected. So all those, whether the methodology is mentioned and whether the methodology looks fair and unbiased. That is the specification. First of all, for secondary data you have to run all these checks before you use it for your business issue. The second one is error. You have to look at whether the data is accurate. That how you will get, again, by looking at the methodology. Sometimes when you look at that secondary data, you might get some very different figures than what you expected. So which might hint that there might be an error, so you can validate it from other source as well. Currency means how current is the data. Suppose you are conducting market research today for a business issue and you are looking at 10 years back census data for secondary data as a secondary data source. Now currency means how current is the secondary data. If you are doing something today, market research, and you are looking at data which is old, 10 years or even 2 years back, COVID was there, now COVID is not there. The data that you would look at 2 years back and now might or might not apply. So how current is the data for your use? Next one is objective. For what per objective the data was collected, the secondary data was collected. So let's say in when the secondary data was collected, let's say it was aggregate retail data about the movement of different brands. The objective was to see the movement of brands in organized retail stores, and your purpose is to look at the consumer behavior with respect to your particular brand, or why people buy this particular brand. Now from that aggregate data you would not be able to get, that data will not be helpful, because your question is why people buy your brand, but the data that you are getting is an aggregate data. That won't be helpful. So the objectives are different. Next was the nature and content of the data. Let's say you want to study the individual consumption behavior, but the data that is secondary data that is available is about household consumption. So the nature and the content of the data is not useful for your study at hand. The last one is dependability. How dependable is the data? Which means look at the source, whether the source is credible, whether the data is dependable, you can rely on that data. So whenever you are looking at some secondary data, just look at where is the source. Is that a credible company or agency or research firm that is giving you that particular data? That would be one of the ideas regarding the dependability of secondary data. Then if the clear method is given, that is another way of seeing how dependable is the secondary data. Some of the e-commerce websites which are not monitored properly by the e-commerce firm, you would see reviews written by their own employees. So kind of reviews written by every e-commerce firm, e-commerce firm's website, you for definitely some of the websites you do not know whether they are credible, because sometimes the seller's own people could also write the review if the correct checks and balances are not put up by the e-commerce firm. So these are some of the criteria to evaluate the quality of secondary data.
So what are some good sources you get this data?
Depends upon what is the kind of research you are doing. There are a lot of government and non-government sources from where you can get the data. We have in library we have both academic and corporate sources to get the data. So we subscribe to CMI database. Likewise, we subscribe to Bloomberg database. I think one terminal they are going to set up. So likewise, there are many financial and non-financial corporate sources of data or databases that are available through our library, and academic resources also. One just has to know what is the right kind of resource for their secondary data resource for their problem at hand. The broad market research data you could get from the reports, or market based data, size and the trends data that you can get from secondary data, these sources. So I will not go into what is the internal secondary data, external secondary data and this and that. We will directly now look at one particular method of doing secondary data analysis. That will be very, very useful. And rest of the theory about secondary data you can actually read from your book, where it is very well given about what are the different sources of secondary data, what are the different websites, directories where you can go and fetch the secondary data and so on, which is very, very self-explanatory. You can just read and find out the sources. What we are going to do now is just to look at how we can do secondary data analysis. This is one of the secondary data analysis exercise that I did just for the demonstration purpose for one of the restaurants in Chennai. The business issue was the sales were going down and the management of that particular restaurant did not know why the sales are going down. So one of the ways is secondary data analysis, right? Now where is the secondary data? You go to the Zomato and reviews are there, right? Reviews are there. So that is a kind of secondary data. Now once you get to that secondary data, what to do with that data? So with the help of only 5 reviews, I am going to analyze that secondary data to get to the probable cause. So these first 5 reviews are given. So the ratings of that particular restaurant were below 3 out of 5. So you want to see what is the probable cause. One way is you filter the reviews and look at first 50 negative reviews or ratings below 3 and below. The other way is you just take the latest 50 reviews and try to analyze them to see what could be the probable cause. Now in this case I have done with only 5. So these are 5 are the reviews given for that particular restaurant. You can quickly read 1 or 2. The first one is rating is 3. The food is decent, but the quality looks on the downside compared to what they charge. Ambience was okay, not on the hygienic side. In the brackets, putting spoons directly on the mop table. The second one is rating 2. What is written is, we picked this place for lunch during office hours. As most of us were vegetarians, and it had decent rating near our office. So you can read what is given. We picked the buffet over a la carte as it was supposed to be their speciality. The soups provided were not exactly flavorful but felt good for the weather. The kati roll blah 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 blah, the others were just mediocre, and the main course was again mediocre. So till the main course, so there is a story written about their experience. So once you have all these 5, all the reviews, let's say you analyze 50 reviews and their ratings are given. Next process is you need to define your unit of analysis. In this case, unit of analysis, which means what will you consider as one unit which you will analyze. Now in this case, for example, if you look at the reviews, you would see paragraphs are written. So generally each sentence or a couple of sentences that are written together are considered as a unit of analysis. So what you will do, or let me reframe. So there are these different terminologies are there. So one would say that once you have these paragraphs, the data about the reviews, these reviews are there. The coding unit, you will look at the unit from which you will extract the meanings. You will look at the unit from which you will extract the meanings, and the minimum unit, the generally accepted unit is you look at the sentences and take out the meaning. Write in 1 word or 2 words what is the code. Code means in 1 word or 2 words what is the meaning of this entire sentence in 1 or 2 words. That is what is called first level coding, open coding. So don't get carried away by the terms. The simple idea is, once you have the reviews, each review, entire review will be a unit of analysis, which means for entire review you will analyze. Now in each review, each sentence, you will derive the meaning by writing. You will derive, for each sentence you will write a meaning in very brief. That will be the open code. For example, for first user, what is written is the food is decent but the quality looks on the downside compared to what they charge. So I have written low in value for money. So for these 2 sentences that were coupled together, that were more or like same sentence, you have to write their brief meaning in the form of open code. Open code means it is giving the same meaning in 1 or 2 words about what is written in the sentence. Next one, ambience was okay, So ambience okay, next code is written, then not on the hygienic side, putting spoons directly on the hygiene poor. So these 3 codes are coming from the first review. So you can do this exercise on Word document by review and edit. So review, show comments by putting comments or track change, but by best is to do by showing comments.
Till now it is like manual process.
No, see, there are softwares available to help you do this job, but one should also know what goes into those softwares, right? So this is the basic process. This is called open coding, where you pick up that your unit of the coding unit is a sentence or couple of sentences that are together. Now in this case, for first review, we put 3 codes that can summarize the idea of the review. You can say these are the unit of analysis, the sentence or a couple of sentences. Now we'll complicate it little later after we complete this exercise. So wherein, let's say, for example, let me discuss that itself here. Let's say if you have conducted an interview where there are 6 questions. So we look at how to code them, we will come to it later, let's not complicate it here. So now we will go to second review. If you look at, we picked this place for lunch during office hours, lunch meal. As most of us were vegetarians, and it had decent ratings fairly okay. We picked the buffet over a la carte as it was supposed to be their speciality. The soups provided were not exactly flavorful but felt good for the weather. Soup quality not good. The kati roll in the starter was the only one we enjoyed the most. The others were just mediocre and the main course was again mediocre. Food mediocre quality, and because what is written is the kati roll in the starter was the only one we enjoyed the most, the other was just mediocre and the main course was again mediocre. Food mediocre quality. So likewise again the codes, the open codes are written for again the second review, third review, fourth review, fifth review. Once you have these codes written, now simultaneously what you have to do is, here I have written the actual names of the people. You have to hide their names. Choose some pseudo names. Maybe just like this is written AS, you can write instead of full name. So you have to hide those names. So once you give the pseudo names, here I am not given. For each review you did the open coding for, you write all the open codes. Just like for first person, 3 open codes are written. For the second, third, fourth, fifth, codes are written. Now after you write these codes, you color code the ones that are similar, that you think are talking about the same issue, same thing. For example, if you look at the orange one, it is staff service poor, no service staff, no staff to greet. So across the users, give a color code to the ones that you think are similar, are talking about the same thing. So here it is about staff service poor, no service staff, no staff to greet, poor prompt service, service not giving equal preference to all customers, poor ordering service. So you know, this is all about poor service of the staff. Then there are others. This dark green, desert quality poor, lack variety in deserts, this is about the quality of deserts. Likewise, for all the codes you have to do this color coding. Give the same color code to the ones that are similar. Then in the next step, for all the codes that were put in the same color, you gather them under the sub themes. In this case orange. In the orange, These all sub themes for poor staff service is written. Now, what is the underlying idea behind all these codes that you have? That is the primary theme, poor service quality. Likewise, next one, desert quality poor. All these three codes, what is the underlying idea? This is poor desert quality and variety. Likewise, for all the similar color sub themes, you need to write the underlying idea which becomes the primary theme. The next one also. Now you see these themes are written, and what is written in the brackets is the how many users, how many reviews are talking about this particular theme, which means these codes come from out of 5 from how many people? These come from 3, this come from 1, this come from 4, 3, 2, 1. So what is the 4 one? Bad experience and recommendation is coming from 4. So you got the primary themes that are very similar to your probable causes. But in this case, you see there could be many probable causes because there are many themes. You need to look at the ones with large frequency. So out of 5, which has the most frequency when you do it for 50 or 100. So when you will be doing it for 50 or 100 reviews, you will get primary themes and you will also get to know which has the largest frequency. So those 1 or 2 would become your probable causes. Now in this case, you could also see the relationship between variables if you want to. So you have poor service quality, mediocre buffet food quality, both are 3, and bad experience and recommendation coming from. So which means poor service quality and mediocre buffet food quality might be leading to bad experience and recommendation. So in a way you can also tentatively look at the relationships. That is one of the ways of doing secondary data thematic analysis. This is the most basic form of thematic analysis. This is called inductive coding. From the data you try to look at you try to see how things happen. You try to understand a part of reality from the data to understanding what is happening. So this you could use for whatever firm if there are reviews available, you could use this technique to get to the probable cause. This is how you put secondary data analysis into practice. Now what if you have let's say interview, that we will come in the qualitative interviews. This is just how reviews are analyzed using secondary data method. Let's say you have secondary data about 2-3 different issues from the same document. Let's say here we have taken reviews, or let me talk about a little bit about the interview data analysis as well. When you conduct some interview, you have multiple questions. Let's say each question is catering to a different business issue. Let's say with one of my executive MBA students, we conducted about 9 interviews. The questions were related to, one question was how the selling is changing or has changed in the COVID and post-COVID world. In the same interview, it was asked what leads to poor salesperson performance in the IT industry. In the same interview, it was asked what leads to achievement and overachievement of quota for salespeople in the IT industry. So these are 3 different questions in the same interview. Now each question you will consider as a separate data document. You will not do the analysis together. You will take each question for a particular business issue separately, just like you did for reviews, and that you will analyze separately, because that is talking about different business issue. In this case, each review was a data document. In the other case, when we will be learning about the interviews, there will be many questions when we ask in an interview. The questions that are talking about the same issue, you can consider them as a part of the same data document, whereas the questions that are talking about different business issue, you take it separately. That is how you do secondary, that is how you do the data analysis for interview. Now interview is primary. This is thematic analysis that you can use for secondary data, that you can use for primary data. It is just that in this case, the restaurant, the review data was secondary because it was used, it existed before the problem was, the business issue came into picture. So this is one of the method. Any questions about this? Now there are many softwares that would help you do this. But if you do not want to use any softwares, you can just use the Word document, comments, and do this exercise. Now there are softwares that do sentiment analysis also. They will look at, they are little advanced version of this one where codes, they will also look at whether these codes are positive or negative, and therefore they will give you sentiments of customers regarding a particular restaurant, let's say. So they will go just, you can do sentiment here as well. You can look at the sentiments and give positive, negative, and evaluate the overall sentiment, whether it is positive or negative about the restaurant.